The woman sighed. "You would have done better to let me walk through the front gate, Lieutenant. But since we're here, so we must do." With a resigned tone, she dropped down onto the ground, onto her stomach, as if it was something she did every day. A muscle twitched in Thorne's jaw. "Sergeant, I want this individual taken into custody and processed for base access violations. I don't care how senior she is or how matter-of-fact she sounds. She bypassed security and that can't go unchecked." Jackson nodded curtly, his gaze unwavering from the woman on the ground. "Copy that, Lieutenant." He turned to 2 guards, barking orders. One of the guards, younger, less experienced, looked momentarily confused, then quickly snapped into action. "On it, Sergeant," he barked back. But before they could lay a hand on her, the woman lifted her head. Her eyes, startlingly blue, were fixed on Lieutenant Thorne. "I believe we have a mutual acquaintance, your brother Samuel. He might shed some light on why you're doing this, Lieutenant. Or perhaps I should say former Lieutenant. It's been quite the fall, hasn't it?" Thorne recoiled, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "What do you know about my brother, about what happened to him?" His brother's disappearance was the most traumatic event of his life, a wound that refused to scab over. He was just a year older than Marcus, his guiding star, his role model. And then one day, he simply vanished on a classified mission, leaving behind only whispers and a trail of unanswered questions. The woman on the ground smiled sadly. "More than you think, Lieutenant. More than you might want me to know." For the first time, Thorne felt a flicker of doubt, a crack in the dam of his certainty. Could she really know something about his brother? Could she be connected to his disappearance? Or was this another attempt to rattle him, to break his composure? His brother's case was a Pandora's box he'd sworn never to open again. Now the woman before him was trying to pry it open, and it terrified him, because she wasn't just any stranger. There was an air of familiarity about her, something in her posture, in the set of her shoulders, in the way she held herself that tugged at his memory. He couldn't quite place it, but it was a nagging discord in the back of his mind. It took him a moment, but finally he found his voice. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his usual bravado faltering slightly. "Just a little cooperation, Lieutenant. A bit of assistance with an ongoing investigation. An investigation you have no authority to conduct on a U.S. military base." "Perhaps not, Lieutenant, but I suspect certain individuals would be quite interested in my findings. Certain individuals who might just share your concerns about security lapses." The corners of her mouth twitched upward. "Let me reiterate, I am not here to harm anyone. I'm merely here to gather some information, to learn how easily secrets can be smuggled in and out of Fort Maxwell." She paused, fixing him with her intense blue gaze. "And if I may be so bold, Lieutenant, I'm here to remind you that sometimes the most dangerous threats come from within." The mention of smuggling secrets and the enigmatic comment about threats from within struck a chord with Thorne. Could this woman be part of something bigger, something that extended beyond the confines of Fort Maxwell? Was she a spy? Was she linked to his brother's disappearance? Or was this all just a figment of his imagination, a desperate attempt to cling to the last shred of hope that there was more to his brother's vanishing act than they were letting on? He chewed on his bottom lip, weighing his options. He knew that he should arrest her, that it would be the logical, the protocol-driven thing to do. But something in the woman's demeanor, the quiet confidence, the eerie calm, made him hesitate. This wasn't like him. He prided himself on his unwavering adherence to procedure, his ability to make decisions with cold, hard logic. Yet here he was questioning himself, questioning his instincts. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice betraying none of the turmoil within. "That is not important, Lieutenant. What is important is that I believe I can help you with your own investigation. If you have questions about your brother's disappearance, I am your best lead." Her words hung in the air, a potent mix of mystery and intrigue. The prospect of finding answers about his brother, even if it meant bending the rules, was an intoxicating thought. But Thorne was a man of duty and decorum. The thought of disobeying orders, of going rogue, was a dangerous game. It could cost him his career, his reputation. But the tug of his personal demons was too strong to resist. "All right," he said finally, his voice betraying a hint of weariness. "What information do you have?" She rose gracefully to her feet, brushing off her trench coat. "As you wish, Lieutenant. Let us begin." She turned, revealing a silver badge pinned to her coat, glinting in the morning sun. It bore the emblem of an eagle, its wings spread wide, clutching a shield in its beak. But what truly caught Thorne's attention was the inscription etched along the edge of the badge, the motto, "The truth shall set you free." The words echoed in his mind, resonating with a strange familiarity. He recognized that motto. It was the motto of the agency his brother once headed, an agency shrouded in secrecy, and power, an agency that even Thorne knew only whispered about in hushed tones. He stared at the badge, his heart pounding in his chest, a mix of excitement and dread gripping him. He had just invited a ghost from his past, a ghost that smelled like rain and carried the weight of buried secrets into his domain. He had no idea what kind of storm she would bring. Thorne led her into his office, a space as regimented and organized as he was. Everything in its place, each file meticulously sorted. The walls were bare except for a large framed photo of General Caldwell, the commanding general of the 7th Army. Through the window, he could see his gate, his fortress. Right now, it was a scene of controlled chaos, soldiers, trucks, controlled chaos. He motioned for her to sit, but she declined, choosing to stand by the window, gazing out at the activity below. "Tell me, Lieutenant," she said, her voice a soft murmur, "how many people pass through your gate every day?" "Personnel, contractors, visitors. I'd estimate between 30 and 40,000 daily, ma'am." She didn't panic when I pressed the gun against her head. I was testing her, trying to find some crack in her composure. But it only made her smile, a ghost of amusement dancing on her lips. "Don't get up," I told her, enjoying the twitch of surprise in her shoulders. "Stay where you are." My fingers tightened on the cool metal, tracing the sharp edges. This game was getting interesting. "You seem to be enjoying yourself, Lieutenant," she said, her voice steady, unwavering. "But I must insist that you remove that firearm. It's quite uncomfortable. And also, may I inquire why we aren't sitting down? It's such a beautiful day. Surely we can find somewhere comfortable to chat." "Why indeed?" I echoed, letting the echo of her words hang in the air. I really was enjoying this. Women were supposed to cower, to cry, to beg. They weren't supposed to meet my stare with amusement and challenge me to a mental duel. I pushed the gun against her head harder, feeling the faint give of her skull beneath my thumb. I'd broken men with less force. "Why indeed?" I repeated, leaning closer, savoring the tremor in her voice as she spoke. "I don't appreciate the tone, Lieutenant," she said. "I do hope that doesn't mean I'm to be reprimanded. I would hate another black mark on my record, especially since I am fresh in command and eager to make a good impression on my new post." "Are you threatening me?" I asked, surprised by the edge in my own voice. It wasn't a question. I knew she was threatening me, but I wanted to hear her say it, to admit it. I needed that confirmation that the hunt was on, that the prey was aware of the hunter's gaze. "Threatening you?" "Goodness, no, Lieutenant," she replied, her voice smooth as silk, yet laced with steel. "I'm merely suggesting that you consider the gravity of our current predicament. We are military personnel, after all, and I'm sure you understand the dire consequences of a simple misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," I spat, the word catching in my throat. "What misunderstanding?" "Well, the fact that you have a gun pressed against my head, for starters," she said, tilting her chin slightly. "Surely that could be construed as a misunderstanding. Or perhaps the fact that you haven't identified yourself, Lieutenant." After all, it wouldn't do to shoot a fellow officer, would it? That is a damn good point, I admitted, surprised by my own candor. The hunt was on, and the prey was playing a deadly game. But she was too skilled, too calm. It irritated me, challenged me. Lieutenant General Thorne, I said, watching her eyes for a reaction. Anything. Damn near anything. She simply nodded, a slight smile gracing her lips. I presume you know why I'm here, General, I said, hating the tremor in my voice. How the hell was I supposed to intimidate this woman? Thorne, she repeated, testing the name on her tongue. Such a common name. Are you related to William Gilmore, the famous general? I shook my head, stunned by her audacity. No, I'm not related to him. He's dead. Oh, forgive me, she said, her eyes flashing with mock horror. I didn't realize. How rude of me. He was a legend, fearless and brilliant, I continued, mesmerized by the play of emotions on her face. He won battles that seemed impossible to win, and lost the ones he couldn't, she added softly, her gaze drifting into the distance. All generals do, Thorne. All generals do. She turned back to me, her eyes blazing with renewed intensity. So why are you here? Why have you detained me? Because you snuck onto the base uninvited, I said, surprised by the bitterness in my own words. You bypassed security, ignored multiple warnings, and trespassed into a restricted area. You were lucky to be alive right now? Trespassing, is that what you think? She asked, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Do you really believe I strolled onto your base as if it were a picnic ground, Lieutenant? Then what are you doing here? I'm here to take over, she stated flatly. Take over what? The squirrel patrol? The janitorial services? I scoffed, feeling a flush of anger rising within me. This is a military installation, General. Not everything is a game to us, is it not, Lieutenant? She whispered, standing abruptly. Then tell me, what are we preparing for? What war are we waging? I don't have clearance to discuss that with you, I snapped, taking a step back. And I suggest you remember your place. You're a trespasser. Is that so, Lieutenant? She murmured, her eyes boring into mine. Then let me make it clear. I am not here as a trespasser. I am here as the newly appointed commander of this post. I expect your full cooperation, Lieutenant. Consider yourself relieved of duty. Report to the Provost Marshal for reassignment. You relieve me of duty? I haven't even finished my shift, I protested, taken aback by her audacity. This is sheer madness. Who are you really? I told you my name, Lieutenant, she replied, her voice devoid of emotion. Amelia Cross, Lieutenant General, United States Army. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Do you understand? Yes, General, I whispered, stunned by the quiet authority that had descended upon me. Like a guillotine, her words had cut through the chaos, bringing with them a sense of order I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Good, she said, her voice softening slightly. Then let's get to work. We have much to discuss and little time to spare. She turned and walked away without another word, leaving me staring after her in disbelief. Thorne blinked, taken aback by the turn of events. The situation was far from over, but clearly he had passed some kind of test. He had held his ground against the most powerful woman in the room. But I'm still curious, she continued, her tone softer now, yet her eyes never leaving his. Why did you decide to press charges? Why did you want to lock me up? Her question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Was she testing him again? Was there some deeper game at play? With respect, ma'am, I had no choice. My orders are clear. Any unauthorized entry after hours is considered a major security breach. We have to assume hostile intent. That's standard operating procedure. He paused, gauging her reaction. But the general's expression remained inscrutable. Her silence was unnerving. Is that what you think I'm here for, Lieutenant? To be a thorn in your side? To challenge your adherence to rules and regulations? Thorne shook his head, feeling the weight of her stare, No, ma'am. I really don't know why you're here, but I can assure you it won't happen again. He extended his arm, palm out, an open invitation for her to pass through the gate. The gesture was polite but firmly authoritative. He wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. He would not allow her to breach security again. Of course, she replied, her voice low and steady. Because we all know how important protocol is to you, Lieutenant. You wouldn't want to bend the rules for anyone, even for someone who doesn't know the first thing about being in the field, would you? Her tone dripped with sarcasm. And for a moment, Thorne saw a flash of steel beneath the calm facade. This woman was dangerous, more dangerous than he had imagined. She knew his weakness, his strict adherence to protocol, and she was using it against him. The very thing that made him a good soldier was being turned into a liability. He felt like he was walking a tightrope, and the slightest misstep could send him plummeting to failure. But he refused to back down. Instead, he met her gaze directly. With all due respect, ma'am, I don't care who you are. If you try to breach the perimeter again, I will arrest you myself. He could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. The unspoken words hung between them, a battle of wills. Then suddenly, a ghost of a smile touched the general's lips. Well said, Lieutenant. You have a lot of guts. I'll give you that. She paused, her eyes twinkling with amusement. But sometimes guts aren't enough. Sometimes you need brains to back up your brawn. Am I right? Thorne resisted the urge to roll his eyes. He had faced down countless enemies on the battlefield, but this woman, with her cryptic words and unpredictable behavior, was proving to be a formidable opponent. What does that mean, ma'am? He asked cautiously. It means you need to learn when to pick your battles, she replied cryptically. Not every rule is worth breaking, but bending them occasionally is necessary. Sometimes a little flexibility can prevent a disaster. Thorne frowned, struggling to decipher her meaning. He had followed the rules to the letter only to find himself in hot water. He needed clarification, but the general was already moving away. Come with me, Lieutenant. I think we need to have a little chat. As she turned to leave, a glint of metal flashed in the dim light. Thorne squinted, trying to get a better look. Was that a badge on her chest? Could this woman be a high-ranking officer? It dawned on him, the possibility he had been flirting with disaster. The general turned, her face unreadable in the shadows. Yes, Lieutenant, it's a badge. And yes, I am a general. The words hit him like a physical blow. He had just disrespected the most powerful woman in the military. The weight of his actions crashed down on him, threatening to crush him. In the face of such overwhelming authority, his carefully constructed composure crumbled. His mind reeled, desperately trying to make sense of the situation. How could he, a lowly lieutenant, have been so reckless? He had dared to defy the most powerful woman in the military. He had challenged General Cross, and now he braced for the consequences. General, we have a situation at the East Gate. An incoming transport has refused to identify, and they're holding the gate open. General Cross paused, taking a step closer to him, her voice dropping to a near whisper. I have a lot of work to do here. General Caldwell's regime was, to put it mildly, sloppy. I needed to know who was running this gate, who had their priorities straight. I came here to the perimeter to see what would happen. If you had let me in based on a flimsy story, you would be writing your transfer papers right now. Thorne felt a wave of relief so profound it nearly knocked him off his feet. He had passed a test he hadn't known he was taking, a test where failure meant professional ruin. General Cross turned to Sergeant Jackson, her expression softening. And Sergeant, I saw it in your eyes. You trusted your gut. Don't lose that. We need both types of soldiers in this world, the ones who trust the list and the ones who know when to ignore it. She then turned back to Thorne, her gaze holding his. Lieutenant Thorne, I am not a man of lists. I am a woman of action. I trust my people, but I need to know they can be trusted. You have proven yourself today. You held the line against a person who appeared to be a higher authority because you knew that without the proper credentials, there is no authority. And for that, I will be expecting you to brief me on the gate's security operations this afternoon. I want every detail. Thorne snapped a perfect salute. Yes, ma'am. I will have the briefing ready. General Cross gave a curt nod and, with a subtle wave of her hand, turned and walked toward the gate's pedestrian entrance. The barrier remained in place. She's not going to use the barrier? Thorne stammered, his brain still trying to keep up. No, sir, Jackson said, a knowing glint in his eye. She's an old-school general. They like to walk. Keeps them in touch with the ground. Thorne watched her go, a small, unassuming figure in a beige coat, her shoulders squared, her walk purposeful. The woman he had been ready to arrest was now his commander, and the gate that had once felt so secure now felt like the scene of a profound and very public lesson. As she disappeared from view, Thorne felt a change within himself. He was still a man of lists, a man who believed in order and procedure. But now, he also understood that there was a power that transcended the written rules, a power that came from knowing when to follow the heart of the law, not just the letter. The world wasn't always black and white. It had shades of beige and sometimes a bruised knuckle. As I pulled my service pistol from its holster, I saw in the periphery the lieutenant raise an eyebrow at me. Even in the dim light, I could see the surprise on his face, quickly replaced by annoyance. But before he could react, I shoved the muzzle of my gun against the back of his throat, hard enough to make him choke, but not enough to draw blood or break skin. Easy, soldier, I heard myself say. I've trained hundreds of guards over the years, but until this moment, I'd never had to point a gun at one of my own, let alone someone as high-ranking as Lieutenant Marcus Thorne. Thorne, of course, he wouldn't know me. I'd only been on this post for 3 days fresh out of Fort Benning, Georgia, where I'd gotten my basic training and assignment orders, where I'd learned how to shoot straight, and where I'd been trained to kill without hesitation. Now I was just a lowly sergeant, barely 20 years old, and I had a gun pointed at one of the top brass. What was I thinking? I asked myself, and the answer surprised me. Thinking clearly because I had no choice. If I didn't think clearly, I could get myself shot. What are you doing, Sergeant? I heard the lieutenant demand. His voice was shaking. The faintest tremor betrayed his attempt at bravado. I knew then that he was just as scared as I was. Only he didn't have a gun pointed at him. Stand down, soldier, I ordered, keeping my voice steady, though my hands were shaking. This was no time to panic. I said stand down. I saw the muscles in the lieutenant's jaw tense as he struggled to maintain his composure. Finally, he exhaled sharply, his shoulders slumping slightly. Who are you? He asked, his voice betraying none of the turmoil I saw in his eyes. Why are you doing this? I looked into his face, trying to read him. I saw defiance, yes, but also fear and a hint of something else, something that looked like regret. You should already know the answer to that, sir, I said quietly. And as for why, well, that's a question for another day. His eyes narrowed slightly, but before he could respond, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed behind us, breaking the tense silence. What's going on here? Boomed a deep voice. Turning, I saw a broad-shouldered man in full dress uniform striding towards us. Recognition dawned on me. Colonel Davenport, base commander. I quickly assessed my situation. If I hadn't been discovered, I could have made it to the outer fence with the lieutenant in tow, but now there was no chance. Davenport was closing in fast, his face a mask of authority and concern. I lowered my gun slightly, but kept it trained on the lieutenant, who was now standing ramrod straight, his earlier arrogance seemingly vanished. Sir, I began, my voice betraying none of the tension I felt. We have a situation. Davenport stopped in front of us, his eyes flicking from me to the lieutenant and back again. In a single fluid motion, He reached out and grabbed the lieutenant's arm, pulling him close. "Thorn, what on earth is going on here?" he asked, his voice sharp with urgency. The lieutenant stiffened, but then relaxed slightly as if Davenport's presence had somehow reassured him. "It's this guy, sir," the lieutenant finally said, nodding towards me. "He's gone rogue. He has a weapon and he's threatening my life." Davenport's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed with suspicion. "Is that right, soldier?" he asked, turning back to me. "Are you threatening Lieutenant Thorne's life?" My finger tightened on the trigger. Was I really going to do this? Point a gun at a colonel? But the look in the lieutenant's eyes told me that if I didn't, he'd have me thrown in jail without a trial. I couldn't let that happen. Not now, not after everything I'd done. I shook my head slowly. "No, sir, I was just explaining to the lieutenant that we have a situation here." Davenport's eyes narrowed further, suspicion evident in their depths. He shifted his gaze from me to Thorne and back again, clearly struggling to assess the situation. After what seemed like an eternity, he finally spoke. "Sergeant, I want you to put that gun down slowly and turn around. You will then place your weapon on the ground and step away from it with your hands raised." I hesitated for a moment, torn between my instincts and my orders. Should I trust Davenport? What if he was in on this? What if the entire base was corrupt and I was just a pawn in a game I didn't understand? But I had to do something. I was out of bullets and my finger was aching from holding the trigger. Slowly, very slowly, I lowered the gun, keeping it pointed away from Davenport and Thorne. When I felt the tension in my arm begin to ease, I turned and placed the weapon on the ground. As instructed, I kept my hands raised, my eyes fixed on Davenport. The colonel didn't flinch. He just stared at me intently, his expression unreadable. I took a step back, then another, keeping my eyes on him the entire time. Suddenly, he snapped his fingers. 2 MPs were at my side in an instant, their hands reaching out to grab my arms. They didn't bother with handcuffs. Instead, they simply yanked me along, forcing me to move. I resisted at first, but it was pointless. These guys were twice my size and strength. Soon I found myself sitting on the floor in a small, dank room, my back against the cold concrete wall. The door slid open and Davenport entered, his face grim. He sat down opposite me, his gaze boring into mine. "So, Sergeant," he began, his voice low and dangerous. "Care to explain what you think you're doing?" I looked up at him defiantly. "I was following my orders, sir," I said quietly. I had a visual on a possible intruder, and I was trying to apprehend him. Davenport leaned forward, his eyes blazing with anger. "That is a blatant lie, soldier, and you know it. Explain yourself." I hesitated, torn between my orders and the truth. I wanted to tell him that I'd seen a shadow, that I'd followed protocol, but I couldn't because I knew I would be dismissed if I did. So I stuck to my story. "I saw a shadow, sir," I said quietly. I followed procedure and moved in to investigate. Davenport's eyes narrowed further. "Are you serious? You really expect me to believe that?" "Yes, sir," I replied, meeting his gaze directly. Davenport got up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You're a liar, soldier, and a damn good one, too." He paused, then added quietly, "I should have known better than to trust you." With that, he turned and left me sitting there alone in the dark. I slumped against the wall, defeated. I had failed. I had been caught. But as the minutes ticked by and the door remained closed, I realized that perhaps failure wasn't always a bad thing. I had followed my instincts, and that had led me here. But it had also given me a glimpse into a world that I had never seen before, a world of shadows and secrets. A world where the line between right and wrong was not always clear. As the door finally slid open and 2 MPs entered to take me away, I knew that my life would never be the same again. I turned to Sergeant Jackson and knew more humble respect in his eyes. "Sergeant, what did you see?" "I saw a person who had been through a lot, sir," Jackson replied, a weary smile on his face. I saw a general who was checking to see if her new gatekeepers were worth her time. Looks like we passed, sir. Thorne nodded slowly, his gaze lingering on the now empty perimeter. He had faced a test and, against all odds, had passed it. He had almost made a terrible mistake, but his unwavering commitment to his duty had saved him. It was a lesson he would never forget, and one he knew would change the way he saw the world. His world was still one of lists, but now it had a new entry, one that was not written down, that etched into his very soul. Trust the procedure, but never, ever lose your instincts. The gate, the guardhouse, the perimeter, they all stood as they had before, unblemished, secure. But for Lieutenant Marcus Thorne, everything had changed. He was still in control, but now he understood that true control wasn't about enforcing rules. It was about understanding when to follow them, and when a higher authority demanded a kind of courage that went beyond the checklist. He had almost arrested the most powerful person on the base, and in doing so, he had proven he was worthy of serving under her.